Greetings and welcome to A Sip of Inspiration.
Every moment in your life is filled with all the opportunities that life has to offer.
My name is Stephanie Wilson-Coleman.
You see, life is a canvas, and you decide to color. What will you choose for your life today?
Listen to the words of the song.
Great show. Thank you. Greetings and welcome to A Sip of Inspiration. My name is Stephanie Wilson-Coleman. I am the Empowerment Doctor. Tonight we're going to bring to you a very interesting topic, and I know due to recent events, people are really interested in knowing what's going on in this subject. Tonight's title of the show is Human Slaves and Sex Trafficking. I discovered in just some brief research that human slavery and sex trafficking is the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world. Now, I didn't say in Chicago, I said in the world, with revenues of approximately $40 billion, with sex trafficking alone generating $12.7 billion annually. And there are millions of adults and children that are forced into human slavery and sex exploitations daily. I also discovered that it includes more than just the sex. The sexual prostitution piece is a small piece of it, that there is bondage and debt. There are forced slaves. People are trafficked away from the quiet suburbs of Chicago, Illinois, into third world countries and actually put to work for nothing at all, and actually made to do all kinds of things that we've read about, maybe things that we don't believe happen in our streets. Today I have three wonderful young ladies who've agreed to discuss this topic with me. I'm going to introduce them to you, and as you know at home, this is a call-in show. The number will appear at the bottom. I encourage you to call in. The number is area code 312-738-1845. See, I believe that we all see things, hear things, and know things. And sometimes we don't know what to do with that information. So I'm hoping that tonight will be the opportunity for those of you listening to actually reach out and help someone who's in trouble, reach out and help someone who knows that they're in trouble or don't even know they're in trouble. A lot of times people disappear and we think that they ran away. And if we don't find a body, we think they're just buried someplace like in Colorado and we're never going to find them. But people are showing up in other countries. People are showing up in the U.S. from other countries. And this is how they get there. My first guest is Heather Morris. Heather, thank you. And I'm going to introduce Heather using my wonderful technology. As I always say, my staff is after me about using and embracing my technology. But Heather Morris is on staff at the Chicago Dream Center. It's a residential program for women and teens coming out of addiction, abuse, homelessness, and trafficking. She's been doing street outreach in Chicago for 4 years and spent 6 months in India working with victims from the red light areas. Thank you for joining me. When I was online looking for organizations to have a conversation with, I ran into the information about the Chicago Dream Center. Having been homeless myself, it sort of caught my eye. I said, what do they do there? And I said, gosh, we've got to get them on stage. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Next is Rachel Derschlag. I just found out a lot about Rachel and Shelby too. We share an alma mater, University of Chicago. That's right. Rachel's been working with the social justice community since 2000. After receiving her BS from Skidmore College in 2000 with a double major in women's studies and social work, Rachel moved to Chicago, where she's worked for Political Action Committee, the Daycare Action Council of Illinois, and the Chicago chapter of the National Organization of Women. In 2005, Rachel earned her master's degree in social service administration from the University of Chicago. Yay! I love my motto. In June 2006, Rachel founded the Chicago Alliance Against Sexual Exploitation, which is an organization that works to eliminate sexual exploitation through litigation, advocacy, organizing and policy reform, and prevention and resource development. Thank you, Rachel, for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me.
And then there's Shelby French. Shelby, too, went to the University of Chicago, so I'm really excited, considering we just had a reunion this past weekend, the MBA students did. So it's really wonderful to have you here. Shelby French is with the International Organization for Adolescents. She has 20 years experience in this field, and she has currently now the executive director for the International Organization of Adolescents, and before that she served on the IOFA board for 3 years. She has received also an MA in social work from the School of Social Services Administration at the University of Chicago, and a Master's of Science and Development Studies from the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. She's traveled and worked in over 30 countries. She currently teaches a class on the issues of child trafficking for the School of Social Work at Loyola University in Chicago, Illinois. Thank you very much for joining me. Now that we have the experts here, tell me, how bad is the problem in Chicago? So we go home to our wonderful suburbs. We hear a lot about, of course, gun violence. I've done several shows on gun violence. That's like the topic, and everyone talks about that, but no one talks about this. Mm-hmm. And this is a bigger issue than gun violence. Mm-hmm. So how big is it in Chicago?
Well, the truth is we don't have great numbers on this issue because it's so hidden, because it benefits pimps and traffickers to keep their victims off the street, away from the eyes of law enforcement. So the best numbers that we do have say that on any given day in our city, between 16,000 and 24,000 women and children are in prostitution.
Wow.
And I think part of the issue as well is that a lot of us here in the United States think that trafficking is something that happens somewhere else. You know, it happens in India or Cambodia. And when you learn what the definition of human trafficking is, human slavery, you realize that what we see here in prostitution is actually human trafficking. And there are these laws that can protect victims and help them get the services that they need. But I think it's a huge shift in our thinking about what trafficking looks like and who can become a victim. And I think we're just all starting to learn about that. And I think you're going to see more people reporting these cases and an increase in cases in the coming years.
Mm-hmm. Now, you work specifically in the area as it relates to children. Mm-hmm. So what are the ages of some of the children who are involved in human slavery and sex trafficking?
When we talk about it really can happen to children of all ages up through adolescence, as well as men and women and adults. We focused on adolescents in particular because we found this to be arguably one of the most vulnerable age groups for ending up trafficked. You're leaving your home, you're trying to find a new job, you may not have the networks to protect you. So we find that adolescence in particular is a very vulnerable age group, and that's why our organization started to help these young people so they know how to not end up in a situation of trafficking and exploitation.
And tell us about the work you do at the Chicago Dream Center.
Well, my position is I work with the New Life for Women program, which is a residential program for women coming off the streets for any reason. And in that, I also have done a lot of street outreach, and that's my heart, is to get to women who may or may not know that they're being trafficked, and they may or may in prostitution, but I want to let them know that there's hope, and that we have an opportunity for them to come and live at the program if they'd like to start over. So what that looks like is there's a group that goes out called Rose of Sharon on Friday nights, and they'll go out every Friday night and talk to the women who are on the track or on the stroll, and just let them know we have services available for you. I also try to reach into different areas of the sex industry. So massage parlors and strip clubs and things like that, and just touch base with the women, so so that they know that there's somebody that will listen to them. So that's what I do. Yeah.
Now, everybody though believes that women in massage parlors or strip clubs are there because they want to be, because you know the proverbial story is they're working their way through medical school. Is what they all say. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm hearing now. Is that's not necessarily the case? That usually they're forced to those kinds of positions.
I think the issue of choice is a really challenging one, because
Okay.
if somebody has so many limited life choices that they feel like the only way to survive or to meet their basic survival needs is to enter prostitution or to be in a fake massage establishment, then is that really choice? And so though some are brought there against their will, some feel like it's a last resort for survival. Mm-hmm. And pimps and traffickers exploit that vulnerability to then bring them in and benefit and profit from them. So I think we feel comfortable saying blame that victim, it was her choice, but really she's looking for some way to survive.
So if you find yourself vulnerable, how do you protect yourself?
That's a very good question.
It's a very good question.
How do you tell? I mean, what do you do?
Well, I think from a preventative side, I think what we try to do is provide, with the age group we focus on, is information. What's a safe job? What's an unsafe job? What are your rights? I mean, we're a rights-based organization, and we believe, people have basic rights to not be enslaved. We thought slavery ended a long time ago, and here we are, and we're still talking about it. I think the information and knowledge is key so that young people are equipped to make the right decisions. I think the more we can stay connected with our young people through our communities, so that they're not isolated and forced to make decisions that end up being very down the road. So for me, it's about getting the information and not being afraid to talk about this.
And what we do on the prevention side is the focus of our organization is to stop the demand side. So we know that if nobody was purchasing sex, the sex trade would go away. There'd be no incentives for pimps and traffickers to recruit victims because there'd be no money to be made. So how do you prevent that from happening? Well, we have to talk to young men. And we have to talk to young men about the pressures they feel to act a certain way as young men, or to act a certain way sexually, and to understand the harms of the sex trade, that it's not cool, that it's not what real men do, so they can make better decisions when they grow up and not perpetuate this problem.
And I think a lot of the times the victims that I have met personally, they weren't aware that they were victims. They had been serving, in this position and giving their money to a pimp, and had no clue that they were a trafficking victim. They had one girl in particular had to do it at her husband's request, and so because she was trying to be faithful to her husband, stayed in that situation, and he was very violent, so she couldn't leave. Or another girl had a drug addiction, so she blamed her drug addiction, but in fact she was trafficked in every sense of the word. She was being forced and had no options to leave, and would tell you that her family was in threat if she did leave. So I think a lot of times because they don't understand how big the problem is, they don't understand that they're being harmed, and they blame themselves, and that keeps the cycle going. So that shame that's placed on them keeps the cycle going.
And I want to say that the legal system, I think, also then treats them like criminals instead of treating them like victims. And so one of the things that we're working on this year is to pass a law, because Illinois is one of only 8 states that gives felonies to people who are being sold in the sex trade. So we're trying to pass a law that takes away that felony, and we just passed the law in the Senate, and it's in front of the House this week. So we're really hoping that by the end of this week we'll be able to say Illinois is looking at this as a crime with a victim and not perpetuating this blaming culture of those who are being prostituted.
So when they find you, when you're walking the street, you're walking the stroll with them, how do they react? How do you start the conversation?
Well, we're a faith-based organization, so we start buying them a rose, if it's the Rose of Sharon, or if it's Alabaster Dreams, I'll give them a gift bag with some beauty products, and the information will be in there. So if they choose to continue the conversation, we ask them what their needs are, where they're at, what's going on in their life, and we just have a friendly conversation. I ask them if they need any prayer, and that's where it starts. Yeah.
So are they in danger just by talking to them?
They could be, but because we have been doing the outreach for so long, what we found is we started doing the outreach just out of a good heart and didn't know that we were dealing with pimps. And, we didn't understand the dynamics when we were doing outreach. So as we got trained, we understood that we were dealing with pimps, so we kept on doing outreach as we always had. And in that, we see the signs. What he doesn't want to speak to us, we back off, and that's how we deal with that. And then we also take the initiative to talk to the pimp first. Is it okay if I talk to her? We want to offer her a rose. Is that okay? And that's some of the ways we try to be safe in our outreach. But because we've been doing it so long, and it'd been our protocol, we didn't know what we were doing, and it worked. So we kept on doing it.
So you kept doing it, right? So they say, "Here comes that lady with that rose again."
Yeah. Yeah.
How many people in your organizations have you say that you have helped actually break the cycle? and start their lives over?
Well, I don't have the exact number, but I know over 200 women have graduated our program, and but that includes all different backgrounds, you know,
Okay.
addiction, homelessness, abuse. We house about women in the first phase right now, and about 12 women in the second phase. So at any given time, there could be between 10 and 24 women that we're helping to move on to the next stage. So
And what are some of the skills you teach, or some of the classes you have?
we have several classes. Anger management. They have 3 classes a day. So so they say they leave with close to a theology degree by the time we're done. So, but they have anger management classes. They have computer classes. By the time they get to the second year, then they sit down with their leader and talk about whether they're going to have go back and find a job, or if they're going to go to school. So yeah, they have women that come alongside them. The leaders of the program have all come out of a similar background, whatever that would be. So either prostitution or abuse or addiction. So so it's more mentorship in our program.
How was your experience in India? Was it much different than here?
Well, it was overwhelming because the number of women was shocking. You know, on a Friday night we go out with a dozen or 2 dozen roses. When I went to India, I had gotten half a block and already counted 85 women and had to stop. You know, and that was half a block, and it was several square miles in the red light district. So it was very overwhelming in that way. And the ages, of course, were younger.
So how did they find you, Rachel, your organization? How did they find you?
So we're mainly an advocacy organization, so most of the work that we do is not direct service, but we
Okay.
do have a legal clinic where we represent victims for free against their perpetrators. And oftentimes they find us through rape crisis centers. So they'll go to a rape crisis center after an assault and then call us. But a couple years ago, we passed a really great law called the Justice for Victims of Sex Trafficking Act, which says that if you've been convicted of prostitution, and so many people have just pages of prostitution convictions, but can show that you were a trafficking victim, and as Shelby said, most of these people have been trafficked, they'll vacate those convictions. So it gives you an opportunity to start your life in a new way because you're not carrying all of that with you. So we offer those services as well to survivors.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It's really exciting.
That
It's
is
something we're
exciting.
really proud of.
If you could pass any law you want to pass, what would that law be?
That law would increase penalties for purchasers, because we know that when purchasers feel consequences, they change their behavior, and it would, instead of having a legal response to those in the sex trade, have a social service response. And so that people wouldn't be arrested and rearrested and going through the criminal justice system, they'd be given opportunities to rebuild their lives.
That is great.
Yeah, that would be my dream.
Okay, we should work to get that one passed.
Would love to.
That's- And how do they find you?
Well, we also are not a direct service organization. We are all former direct service providers. And when you're working with somebody, you're mired in the details of keeping them safe, but you see all these other things around you, these bigger picture things that could make your life easier as a direct service provider. So we focus on community organization. We facilitate the Cook County Human Trafficking Task Force. And we have been working with the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, Anita Alvarez, as well as the Salvation Army Stop It program and the U.S. Attorney's Office in looking at how to prosecute cases, investigate cases, and build a victim-centered approach. So what we try to do is train and provide technical assistance to all the first responders out there. So we don't see this just as a legal problem or a law enforcement problem, a social service problem, a spiritual problem, an emotional problem. It's all of those. So we try to bring as many members of the community together so that they can recognize what trafficking is, and they are connected to a system that can help provide services, that can help bring people to safety and help prosecute the offenders.
What does prosecuting the offenders look like? I mean, we don't, you know, we always, like you said, we're always after the victims. When you,
Right.
even in the television shows, when you see the raids, like on the prostitutes
Yeah.
on the street, you know, they're taking in the women and they're talking to them badly, and of course, for movie purposes, they look terrible,
Yeah.
right? And you never see the guys
Right.
ever,
Right.
you know. But then you have all these women lined up that you're booking, and
Yeah.
and then they never tell anybody. So what does the offender? How does the offender look, and how does prosecuting the offender
Right. Well, what's interesting is that the state of Illinois has had a trafficking law on its books since 2005. Not until 2010 was it actually applied. So for the first time, the Cook County Human Trafficking Task Force to date have prosecuted about 70 plus defendants and have brought services to countless numbers of victims. So the prosecution is basically a collaboration between various areas of law enforcement, right? And I think it's always hard for the FBI and ICE and CPD to all work together, but in cases like this, you really need to have that. So proactively, these organizations have been working together, so it's not a turf battle, but they're working together and they're staying victim-centered. I think that's the most important thing, because as you were mentioning, you see that if there is a raid, young women and men are scooped up who potentially might be victims and treated like criminals. Right. In this case, when law enforcement goes out through the task force to look to investigate, they bring a social service person with them. So immediately the victim is not put in front of a cop and forced to tell their story. They're talking to somebody who's give you a choice. I'd like to help make things better. Would you talk to me? So it makes it a less threatening environment. So that's sort of how the Cook County model in particular does things, very collaboratively with social service and law enforcement.
And what's really something innovative is that Sheriff Dart has hired 3 survivors of the sex trade to go out with him. So they work for the county. And so when they're doing a raid, it's survivors of prostitution who are talking to the women. So they understand. So it's a safe person, and that's a just completely innovative model.
That is fantastic. We do have a studio audience with us, and I want to invite them to approach the mic and ask questions. I always have to threaten them for those of you at home, because they always say, I'm going to ask a lot of questions, and then they get here, and all of a sudden they forget.
Good night. And my name is Gwendolyn Roll, and I'm just sitting out, just dumbfounded. I've heard about it, human trafficking and all of that for a long time, and I've listened and watched documentary. It's really heartbreaking, because these children are children. A lot of them are young and innocent. And I was just thinking about, Stephanie asked the question about the perpetrator, the persons who are committing these crimes. I find it that more so it's men than women. What is the ratio between men trafficker and women? Do you find women being a part of this on a big scale, or is it more dominantly men?
In the cases that I've been familiar with as a direct service provider and what we provided technical assistance on, it's a range. Like there's, victims can be men, women, or children. We've seen children traffic children. Often victims will be forced and coerced to victimize others as well. So I think the important thing is to always not kind of go with your assumptions about what a trafficker looks like, but understand what the definition of trafficking is, because it really can be anybody. We've had social workers, doctors, diplomats who have trafficked people for labor and sex. So it's really important, I think, to not have an image of what the trafficker looks like, though often it's true, and men certainly represent a good proportion of the traffickers, but to understand that people of any background can potentially victimize others and target the most vulnerable.
Wow. Well, thank you for that. One last comment. I feel it's such a sad, I'm trying to think about what kind of situation the perpetrator came from, the home and everything, to see that people would actually sell kids, raped them, just abused them. And a lot of this is, like you say in the beginning, how it's such a big money-making, business. They look at it as a business. It's so sad to see that, just as drug is, that people out there would feel comfortable in their heart and their spirit receiving money and becoming successful, and buying the big houses and cars from selling young kids and using their bodies, and I always think about people, do that perpetrator really understand? That's a cruel heart to feel that I'm going to sell or abuse a young child, and that's going to bring me gratification for me to live in a big house and a car. I'm wondering, what kind of mind have you ever had any encounter with the perpetrator to find out what they went through, what they abused, you know, some stuff that they went through, to be settled and to be comfortable to go to sleep at night knowing that my job or my career is human trafficking or raping kids or taking advantage of persons.
I think there's a range of answers for that. I used to work with sex offenders who were also perpetrators and traffickers. And it was a very difficult job. They were court mandated to come to see a counselor, often out of prison. And the majority of them have been abused themselves. I think there's a study somewhere that states that the majority of people who are abused will not grow up to be abusers, but the majority of abusers have been abused in their past. I think there are people who have a variety of different incentives to do things, you know, whether it's, you know, for personal gain. I think that's a piece of the puzzle we need to do more work on to understand what puts a person in the position to be able to exploit somebody like that.
And we helped work on a research study about 25 pimps in Chicago because there really isn't much research on that. And the title of the study ended up being From Victims to Victimizers because all of them from broken homes. All of them had experienced abuse, which doesn't justify what they did, but it gives you that context. And most of them sold drugs originally and said it's much easier to sell human beings than it is to sell drugs. There's so much less risk in selling human beings, which is a reflection on who do we prioritize in the way that we spend our law enforcement focus.
And trafficking has become, trafficking is becoming more part of gang culture. As she was mentioning, it's you know, what do you want to do? A bag of cocaine or a person? What's easier? What are you going to get caught with most easily? You can manipulate a person, but you have a bag of drugs or you have a gun on you. So we're seeing more of gangs as money-making enterprises focusing on trafficking of young girls and boys.
Well, thank you so much. I just want to applaud you for working in that area. I know it's something that you really have to love and have a heart, you know, to help persons. I just want to, you know, continue to encourage you and more in that as we try to help and bring more answers to this terrible situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to take a quick break, but just for the audience, we do this every show. I have a really good friend that has a campaign or program called We Live and Remember, using all of the colors and the awareness colors for illnesses and just anything that could happen. And it seems like tonight's show, just so he will know, we have covered several colors, almost all the colors in the spectrum. So as you guys think about that, I want you at home to consider, are you a victim or are you a victimizer? Give us a call, 312-738-1845. In the meantime, stay put. We'll be right back.
Now the trees sang this song to me. He said the birds sang it to the breeze. Just in case I was feeling down and didn't really want to be around. He said the breeze sometimes come with rain, but nothing in life stays the same.
Got the nails here.
Tomorrow's gonna
I got it last
bring a
time.
change.
I'm busy.
Busy.
For some people, living with painful hips or knees can turn little jobs into big jobs. But it doesn't have to be that way. Today, physicians and patients are partnering together, choosing from a new generation of treatments and therapies that can not only reduce hip and knee pain, but restore spring. Life's too short to be stuck in the slow lane. To get up to speed on just how far hip and knee treatments have come, visit orthoinfo.org, a public service message from the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons.
Don't forget tomorrow's trash day.
This is my family. That's my mom and dad. and my brother. And that's me, future Hall of Famer. That's Grandpa. He's my best friend. Grandpa's got diabetes, but he's got it under control.
I keep my blood sugar close to normal. That means I watch what I eat and walk every day. I always take my medicine and test my blood sugar because I want to be around to see the next Jackie Robinson.
Control your diabetes for life. Call 1-800-438-5883.
It wasn't supposed to be like this. My baby's so worried. My grandbaby's so tiny. No one knows why she was born premature. Or if she'll be okay. All we can do is wait for the answers.
Living is the only way tomorrow's gonna ever come. Listen to the words of the song. Everything's gonna be alright. Everything is gonna be Now the trees sang a song to me. He said the birds sang it to me.
Greetings and welcome back to A Sip of Inspiration. I'm Stephanie Wilson-Coleman, the Empowerment Doctor. We've been talking about human slaves and sex trafficking. And during the break, we were talking about more of, do you want to walk through the airport with a bag of cocaine or with a human being? And I'm just sort of appalled that we're going from selling drugs, and that's never okay. But somehow it's not okay to sell drugs, but it's okay to sell people. And I just find that appalling. But it's happening every day. So how we understand having limited opportunities, and then not even realizing that you're trafficking. But let's talk a little bit more about the perpetrator, the bully on steroid, as I called it, the person who is convincing you or threatening you to think that this is the thing that you have to do. So what kind of person does that? What's the personality? How do you recognize them?
Well, survivors that we talk to say they're the best psychologists that they've ever met because they can spot vulnerability so well. So they'll go to places where especially youth are vulnerable, Greyhound bus stations, malls, outside of DCFS homes. And they pretend to be boyfriends. They look for people who seem like they come from a history of trauma and say, no one's ever understood you, I love you, you're wonderful. And they shower with gifts, and there's this period of just, grooming and bonding. And then, oh, our money's run out, I've done all this for you, I can't pay rent, you do something for me. And at that point, a bond has been created. And so the victim feels like, but he's my boyfriend, he loves me. Heather was saying that this isn't my pimp, this is someone who cares. He might be the only person who cares about me. And so you see then why it's so challenging often to leave, because they have that bond. And that's intentional for the pimp to create that, because it's much harder for someone to exit when they feel that connection.
So, at home, do we need to do to ensure that we're not sending vulnerable children or vulnerable adolescents or young adults out into the world to find themselves trapped in that kind of a situation? What do we need? What do we do?
Well, I think building a strong sense of self in young people is really important. It can be very difficult, but ensuring that people and young particular know their rights, like what they have a right to, and how they should be treated. I think also we were part of a statewide campaign called Rescue and Restore, which is a federally funded program to build awareness about trafficking. And the campaign slogan was "Look beneath the surface." So I think as we protect our own kids, we also have to protect our own communities and start looking at things a little bit differently. So if you see a child who lives in your complex, who doesn't seem to be related to the people who live there, and doesn't go to school, and men are coming in and out, and it doesn't seem to be a family home, that could be a red flag.
Okay.
Or in looking at labor trafficking. So for example, if you go to a restaurant and you see that the people who work there live there in the back, there's mattresses, or they seem intimidated and scared, or they don't have a choice to leave the job. These are things that as community members we can do. So we protect our family first, and then we look at the community and look beneath the surface to find those signs of trafficking.
And I think, you talked about how do we help prevent vulnerability, but I think it's so important that parents talk to their young boys.
Yes.
And they talk to their sons about all of the media they're consuming that's saying real men are sexually aggressive, they have dominance, they have this power dynamic, and if you don't have that, then you can just go out and buy it. Or, young men tell us that their uncles or their fathers took them for the first time to purchase sex. So we need to start young men to say, don't grow up to be a perpetrator. Don't look at pimps as things that are cool. Don't call women hoes and sluts and prostitutes. Start to be an advocate and an ally to be part of the solution.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you very much. Okay. And I know, Heather, you see women across the gamut. Drug addiction and prostitution and homelessness. And what do they tell you from their experience that we need to do, and how do we help them?
Well, I'm going to go back to the original thought that a lot of them blame themselves. They don't really understand that somebody should have been there to pick up the pieces in the beginning. And that's the hard thing, is trying to help them understand that they were never meant to go through that. And that's kind of one of my when I teach the women, I have a class on Friday night that I called Set Free Spa, and I organize it around being beloved, treasured, and free, and so that's what I try to implant in them. Instead of going back and trying to undo the past, I try to start there and say, you're beloved because God made you, you're treasured because you have a calling and gifts no matter what's happened in your past, and you're free because we're all meant to be free. And so that's where I start, and from what they tell me, just walking with them and being their friend and making them feel loved, because most of them have come from some kind of situation where they just felt like that guy was more important than the family life, or whatever it was that opened the door for that, So we have to instill that, kind of go back into that thinking that let the person who said, I love you, you're so important. Well, we should be saying that, right, to one another.
We should be saying that to one another.
We should be saying that,
yes. Hi, we have a question from the audience.
Yes, hi, my name is Reverend Jackson from Prayer Changes Things Ministry Domestic Violence Program. My question is, what do you do once the perpetrator goes to jail and then come back out, and then you find more that it actually done to other children in a person's household?
Well, I think I've seen a lot of perpetrators who've been arrested for other types of crimes and then come to find out that they were also trafficking on top of that. So I think if anybody comes across that, that's an additional crime that needs to be I'm working, IOFA's working specifically with DCFS to build their response to trafficking victims. They have not worked with trafficking victims before, but they are now building a very specific clinical response to be able to investigate perpetrators around the issue of human trafficking. So I think you have that resource available to you as well. And if there are further crimes, they need to be reported. And if it comes down where trafficking was there when you didn't see it before, it will be acted on.
Okay, say if the crime happened like 10, 15 years ago, and then you're really getting to the root of it now because the person is grown and able to talk.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah.
Does it matter, does it make a difference if the victim was in adolescence at the time? Because that makes a difference.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think adolescence is such an important time of growth and development, and there's a lot of things I think when we're young we don't admit or recognize that are happening, and you don't recognize that until you're older, when you have a place to talk. From the legal standpoint, you know, I'm not sure about the statute of limitations with trafficking laws. These are areas that are just starting to kind of be explored and the law updated to respond to. I think providing that victim with exactly the services that you would provide or the support you would provide for somebody that it happened to yesterday. I think it needs to be recognized. They need to be told it was not their fault, and they need to be embraced as they would if they just came out of the situation, because they could be living it. You know, we advocate a trauma-informed approach. So while people respond differently for types of situations, we're going to assume that there's some trauma and a story and pain. And I think it needs to be treated in the same way you would if someone was just coming out of that situation.
And we have lawyers on staff that can be of help if people are in that situation, who are specifically knowledgeable about things like statutes of limitation when it comes to trafficking. And so those are free services that are available to anybody who wants them.
Now this is Rachel, and tell them about your services.
So we run something called Sexual Assault Justice Project, and it is a pro bono legal project for victims of any type of sexual harm, so whether it happened in or outside of the sex trade industry. And we have 3 staff attorneys that will represent people in civil court against a perpetrator, or will help them navigate the criminal court system, which can be confusing and also sometimes not as supportive of victims. And so that's something that anyone can call and have a consultation, and I think the number is 773-244-2230. And so we'd love to have more people in the community access that resource.
Hi, my name is Janice Webster, and I'd like to know what's the youngest victim you've been able to help and the oldest, and what do you do for the youngest when you find them? I mean, you have housing for the older ones.
For the housing, yeah.
But are you able to do something of that nature for the younger ones?
Well, we have a teen program, and our teen program is for at-risk youth. We refer the trafficking victims to Ann's House, the Stop It program, because that's specifically for sexually exploited and trafficking victims. The program that I work with is 18 and up, and we have women who are 18 to in their 60s, and some who've been working that many years in prostitution. So, so I know that as far as trafficking youth, that we do refer them to the Stop It program because they have more resources that are trafficking specific for that age group.
Thank you.
I will say one thing on that is I'm always looking at reasons to be more proud of Illinois than I already am, and we have one of the most progressive laws about prostituted youth in the country. So up until 2010, youth who were being prostituted were being arrested and prosecuted, for committing a crime. So in 2010, we worked with a coalition that passed something called the Safe Children's Act, which said that anyone under the age of 18 will not be prosecuted for being prostituted. So all of a sudden, youth are being treated like the victims that they are. So it's something that we're very proud of, and states throughout the country are looking at Illinois trying to replicate our law, since it is one of the most progressive.
And just to highlight the contradiction we have, we say that a minor cannot consent to having sex.
Right.
But outside of Illinois, in the majority of states, youth can be arrested for selling sex, which doesn't make sense, right?
You can be arrested for selling what you can't consent to.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay. With that, we're going to take another break. The call-in number is 312-738-1845. For those of you at home, I want you to think about what's going on, not only in your own home, but as Shelby said, in your community. Is there any action you need to take? While you think about that, we will take a break and we'll be right back.
A bird sang this song to me. There was a message in its melody, sweetest lyrics that I ever heard. There's a message in the songs of birds. He said, tomorrow is another day. Living is the only
search is on, because Become a part of Project We Live and Remember in Color 2013 Midwest Tour. Searching the Midwest for educators and talent of all ethnicity, singers, dancers, musicians, models, and potential models of ages 3 years old to 100 years old. Yes, 100 years living and remembering in color. Simply go to www.weliveandremember.com. Click Campaign Cause and Awareness. Locate your color and submit your information. Also, text contact information to Project We Live and Remember in Color at 1-773-621-3372. That's 1-773-621-3372. Limited spaces available.
Relax and imagine your perfect life. If what you're imagining isn't the life you're living right now, then you need to experience Stephanie Wilson-Coleman. A victim of abuse and poverty, Stephanie overcame the odds to rise to success. Make the decision to allow Stephanie to help you move forward to your success through her books and empowerment tools, available at champagneconnection.com, where you can dream big.
Everything is gonna be alright. Everything's gonna be alright. Let me tell you, it's gonna be alright. Everything's gonna be alright.
Welcome back to A Sip of Inspiration. I'm Stephanie Wilson-Coleman, the Empowerment Doctor, your host for tonight's show. The topic, human slaves and sex trafficking. Got a question from the audience.
Yes, I was listening and I'm hearing so much wickedness in high places, so much principalities that need to come down. I'm hearing rich man, poor man, beggar man, thieves, doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs. How dangerous is this for the warriors that are going to try to pull it down? How much danger are you in to get this to come to an end?
Well, you know, when you, I'll tell a story. When I was doing outreach, and I was in the first year or so, and then one night I went out to just do something simple, go to Jewel, and I turned a corner and it was really, really dark, and I got that immediate like, oh, I shouldn't be here. This is dangerous. And because I've been carrying this burden in the heart for this, my immediate thought was, well, what if I was 14? Yes. And so I think that's what it takes.
Thank you.
I think that's what it takes.
Hello, my name is Alexia, and my question is, what precaution or message do you have for young women that's not only forced, but their only survival is prostitution because there's so much abandonment around, or they don't have nobody else to turn to, and that's the only way that they survive?
I mean, you have to respect that. You know, I often, when I'm talking about the law and things like that, I say victim, but when I'm talking with people who've been in it, I'm addressing survivors. Mm-hmm. And this is what young people are doing to survive. And we sort of always want to meet the person where they're at. You can't send somebody immediately to get safe. Right. So I think it's respecting the fact that they're doing what they need to survive. Mm-hmm. And really, I think, acknowledging that, and through relationship building, particularly with other survivors, I think that's sort of the path to, getting someone to a much safer, healthier place.
And but in our communities, I think, and in all communities, I think we see some of the signs and we ignore them. Mm-hmm. Right. You see kids who are hanging out late, or they don't seem to have any place to go, or you see the kids who are hungry or dirty, and we tend to turn our heads, you know, because, you know, we're well taken care of, we're well fed, and our homes are comfortable and clean. And I think that that's when you make the mistakes, and then when you make these children incredibly vulnerable. I grew up in a household where my grandparents raised me, and there was a family down the street, and, you know, they didn't have a father there. You know, I had a grandfather, but they didn't have a father. And they were hungry, and my grandparents would always make sure that they got an extra bag of groceries to take to them. You know, he hunted and fished, and we had gardens just to make sure that they had food. There's so much we can do that we don't. And we underestimate the power of a kind word. We underestimate the power of letting children know that they have a champion, and that we're the champion. That no matter where they are and what they've experienced and what they've done, somebody loves them. And that somebody
could be
is you. Could be you. Okay? And it doesn't take to demonstrate the love sometimes. It is a conversation or a kind word or a true asking, how are you doing?
Pushing aside the label of these are bad kids.
Right.
You know, not good kids wouldn't do this. Well, these are good kids.
These are good kids.
Yeah.
And they're doing it. It's just like we see good kids doing dumb stuff all the time. And if we don't talk to our boys like Rachel, they don't know that this is not a badge of manhood or badge of honor, that what they're actually doing is not only disrespecting this female child, but their own sisters and aunts and uncles and cousins. And those are lessons that have not been taught. And we just start where we are. You start in your home, and you start in your neighborhood. And if we can take care of our homes and our neighborhoods, then we can help them be out of work. They would have no work. And that's their goal, is to not have any more laws to pass, not have any more homes that they have to fill, and no more counseling to do. And it starts with us.
This is true. Hello, my name is Ronald Carter. My question is, well, it's not even a question, actually. I just want to help through you three to really put a more graphic face on the actual problems through examples of what really occurs. You know, I would like, if possible, to convey to this audience, and just for the sake of the public, really knowing the extremes of how diabolical the whole forethought and how malicious it is from the victimizers, and the things that the extremes that they're going to, just so the unaware public can really identify with the severity of these things and the lengthy period of times without being so unambiguous, you know, to just try to convey.
It's a $40 billion industry. So with $40 billion, it's safe to assume, and Americans don't like to think terrible things, it's safe to assume that there's crime and abuse and murders and death. Not everybody leaves this alive.
It's also safe to assume that we all know someone who's supporting this in some way. And so I think, you know, Shelby was talking about the look beneath the surface for victims. We also need to hold those accountable in our community. If someone's coming in and saying, oh, you know, I went to this bachelor party and, you know, a woman came in, we need to say, that's not okay.
Exactly.
You know, we need to stand up and say we need to make different choices and to hold each other accountable.
That's right.
And I can say, just from talking to the women that I have asked the question, is it violent out there? And the answer is 100% yes. And the answer is to be graphic, one lady had been left for dead in a ditch, and another lady had been burned, and another lady had just extremely violent things have happened against her from the Johns and from the traffickers. And so I don't think a lot of girls know that when they go in there. Just to quote one of the women, she said, it's not easy out there, baby, and anybody who's on the streets knows it's not easy. And she was referring to the violence.
The violence is terrible.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Jolinda Perkins from Daily Bread Bakery, and I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to ask, how many of them truly do believe when you go out there and you reach them from where they are that they can make it without that, because they've been so classically conditioned to believe that that's the only route to survival because they are homeless and the situation is the only thing that they know? How many of them that you for truly believe that they can be helped and they do take the help and they don't go back? Or
you know, I just don't mean to interrupt. I would say at first none of them believe. And you can take it out of the confounds of sex trafficking or homelessness, but each and every one of you, when you embraced a new idea, fractions for instance, you didn't believe you could do it, but somebody was your champion and kept telling you you could do it. You had what it took. You can make it. And it's the same thing. It's not an overnight magic pill. It's what they know. And they know how to work it. It's just like we go to the same jobs every day. Half of us hate the jobs we go to. Well, we go, okay, because we don't believe we can do anything different, but we go. So it's the same thing. So it's not a magic pill. No, it's not like I'm not going to go back to do it because that's all I know. And making money is difficult. But we have to hold the faith for them and the prayer for them and be their champion and be certain that they understand that not only do we believe in them, that we expect them to be somebody. That's our job. So that means talking to our boys and talking to our girls and our nephews and our nieces and that strange kid down the street that you don't know what in the world they up to, okay? But you know they up to something because y'all all know them, right? Talking to those kids. If that's talking to your older son's families, if it's voting for the law, if it's signing a petition, if it's every time you hear something that goes on that's not right, if it takes you standing up, you've got to stand up. Because everything that we as people have stood up for and fought for, we have won. We only lose when we don't fight. Okay, with that, we are out of time. I want to thank you all for joining me. Thank you again, Heather, Rachel, and Shelby, for joining me. It was a great show. Thank you to my wonderful audience. Give you all a hand. Thanks to all of the people who've shown up on my website, at my seminars, at my book signing. And I want to take just about 5 seconds and invite you to an empowerment series on June 11th. Go to my website. It's absolutely a free event. You know I do these during the summer, and it's going to be summertime. I'm Stephanie Wilson-Coleman, the Empowerment Doctor, and as always, I want you to dream big and live that life you've imagined. And remember, life is too short to drink cheap champagne.
Tomorrow is another day. Living is the only way tomorrow's gonna ever come. Listen to the words of the song. Everything's gonna be alright. Everything is gonna be. Now the trees sang a song to me. He said the birds sang it to the breeze. Just in case I was feeling down and didn't really want to be around. He said the breeze sometimes come with rain, but nothing in life stays the same. Tomorrow's gonna bring a change. The message remains the same. Everything's gonna be alright. Everything is gonna be. Now if I'm a part of everything, there's a message I was sent to bring from life's university.